Welcome to the Fix at 6. Tonight, we're going to be talking about 3 habits for a better life. So the things that we do day to day, the things that we do consistently, that's what makes up our life. But it's also what makes up our health. And that's really what I want to focus on with these 3 tips, or habits, I should say. So to me, a tip is something that you can implement every once in a while. A habit is something that we should be able to do every single day. And I took some time thinking about what do I feel is actually the most impactful things that we could start to do every day, that if we were consistent with this, we would be massively different at the end of the year. And I'm happy to say these are the 3 that I think are the most important. And it doesn't mean that we don't do other things. We talk a lot about sleep and getting enough protein and hydrating. Those are incredibly important. And please take this information knowing that those things are hyper important, but those aren't necessarily habits. Where these things that I'm going to go over, these are habits that we can start to implement starting today. So the very first thing is called food sequencing. We've talked about this a little bit in the past, depending on your exposure to Fix Medical, but food sequencing to me is very amazing because for someone eating the same exact meal, person A and person B, but if person B does the food sequencing, in studies, they've been shown to lose a lot more weight. What does that mean? That in a 6-week study, they actually had people do the same exercise, same diet, eating the same food, but one group did what's called food sequencing, and they lost 50% more weight. So imagine making the same investment into the stock market as your friend, the same exact stock, but them getting 50% more return. So how do we do this? We do this by eating our foods in the order of vegetables first, proteins and fats second, and then our carbohydrates third. Now keep in mind, carbohydrates, that can be candy, ice cream, sugar, and fudge, or that can be pasta, sweet potato, white potato, or any other type of carb. So what they start as, we're talking about what they end as. Those are all carbohydrates. There's only 3 macronutrients. So why do we do this? If you imagine having a funnel from your mouth to your stomach, and when we eat, the food breaks down in our mouth, and then it has to make its way down to that funnel. And for the interest of this conversation and this example, let's just pretend that at the bottom of the funnel is when this food actually impacts our bloodstream. So when we chew our food and we break it down, and it still is good-sized molecules when it breaks down. Even though to us, to the naked eye, it's all really small, it's mush. But when we chew a vegetable, it's still a pretty good-sized molecule. So when we eat that first, it's like putting a boulder or a big rock in that funnel. Now, when we break down our proteins and our fats, those are more medium-sized. So instead of that rock or boulder, imagine like a baseball. So it's still good size, but it doesn't clog up quite as much of that funnel going from the mouth to the stomach. And then lastly, our carbohydrates, and again, whether that's a sugar or it's like a sweet potato or a white potato or anything else that breaks down into a carb, those are like grains of sand. So if I have that big rock first, and then the baseball or that medium size second, and then our last one are those little grains of sand, if I go in the right order, now those little grains of sand are making their way down that funnel a lot slower. And what happens a lot of times is that people eat in the exact opposite order. We have all our grains of sand first, and then you have those 2 bigger rocks. So by changing the order that we eat without removing any of the foods, we massively impact how big of a blood sugar spike is created. And the less of these blood sugar spikes we have in our life, the healthier we are going to be. So the reason I'm sharing this habit is I'm not asking you to eat anything differently or to not eat a certain food or to add something in. But by doing this, you're going to inherently ensure that we create the smallest possible glucose spike that we could. The other thing is, I said eat your vegetables first. You should have vegetables with every single meal. But if you don't, and there's no greens, still have your protein and fat first, and then the carbohydrates last. So that's tip number 1. Eat your foods in the right order. Tip number 2 is another one that has to do with food, but is also a very easy habit to implement. And this is just exercising in some capacity after our meals. This has the same intention of lessening that blood sugar spike or the blood glucose spike. And the example I use for my clients is that when we eat food, imagine there being a bodyguard, and that bodyguard is sorting where that food goes. Is this person active right now? Like, is Sam Wagg active right now? Well, the food that comes in should be used for fuel because I'm burning it off. But if I am sedentary and not active, the food that comes in should be stored for later. So after we eat a meal, we have about a 90-minute window for our body to make that decision. So there's two different ways that we can go about this to sort of trick our body into thinking that we're being really active and that we should utilize this fuel. So number one, and the easiest, is right after I eat, if I go for a 10-minute walk, that is enough time for my body to now be convinced that I'm being active and I could utilize this fuel. And what's pretty magic that happens is when our body is now tricked and that security guard, so to speak, takes that fuel and pushes it over for use, we're actually able to take in more fuel and burn more of it. So our capacity to utilize that fuel is better than if it had just pulled it from storage and brought it into use for our body. Not to get too sciencey, but that's a cool little extra. If you can't go for a 10-minute walk, so say you just finish your lunch, maybe you eat at work and you have a cubicle job, it's high stress, you're just eating some quick food and then you need to get right back to work. If you don't have that time to do that 10-minute walk, doing 30 reps of a body weight exercise is also enough to kind of pull that trigger or to force that fuel into usage. So what does 30 reps look like? Air squats is our favorite. That's my number one thing I like to recommend because you're hitting the most amount of muscle. So you're just increasing that even more. So you have to be at the cubicle, you have to be seated at your desk. Just doing like some calf raises in that position can help as well. But doing any body weight exercise, maybe push-ups against the wall, so a little bit of an incline, but you don't need to be doing an exercise like you're going to really break a sweat. It doesn't have to be weighted by any means. We're just doing body weight. So 10-minute walk for 30 reps of a body weight exercise. And very similar to the food sequencing, there are massive differences between the blood sugar spikes that happen. So that 30 reps happens pretty fast. So just by doing something like that, we're being active. There's a great example. If you were to have an alcoholic beverage and sit down, that blood sugar spike is really going to hit. Whereas if you had that alcoholic beverage, sat down, same exact alcoholic beverage, but instead of sitting down, you go dance for a little bit or you do something active, it's going to be considerably less because it's still going to pull some of that fuel over for usage. So last tip we're going to go over here is having a morning routine. And again, habit versus tip. I think that this is something that's so important because ultimately it's whatever you need to do to get shifted into the right mindset. So there's a couple key tenets I think should be a part of this for everyone. And I'm just going to go over 3. 1, when we first wake up in the morning, finding a way to find gratitude. And that's going to be a little bit different for everyone. I usually start really general for myself, thankful that I woke up today. I'm thankful that I have a functional body, thankful I have a roof over my head, that I'm safe, I made it through another night, I'm rested, I'm recharged, I'm ready for a new day. And that there's so many people on this earth that don't have a functioning body, that won't be able to step up out of their bed, that don't have a safe place that they call home, that aren't going to step into a shower with warm water. And starting being thankful for just basic things that we have that sometimes we take for granted. So that way, as we go through our day, we can be more grateful for the other things that are around us and be in a better, more accepting place for the rest of the earth. So finding some gratitude, finding a moment to, for me, this is meditation, but it can be a little different for everyone, but some quiet time to yourself that you can quiet your mind. And when I say for me, it's meditation, I mean literally that I'm going to meditate for 15 minutes, nice and quiet. The only goal is to not have too many thoughts, and it's almost like gaining dominion over my body, just like I was training a dog to sit. When I feel a little uncomfortable, I start to think about other stuff. It's just nope, this is what we're doing right now. So it's me kind of gaining control over that little voice in my head that I'm in control today. That doesn't mean every single one of us has to meditate. Sean, who you hear in here a lot, he likes to do a cold plunge in the morning. So a lot of times that's 2 or 3 minutes of him in a cold tub. But of course, that forces you to be very mentally clear, quiet, calm, focus on the task at hand, breathe, and be present. So this can look different for everyone. Maybe that's journaling. Maybe that's more of a religious moment for people in the morning. They want to go through some Bible verses or pray or do some type of worship, whatever that is. So step 1, gratitude. Step 2, finding that time for some mental clarity for you. And then 3 is doing some type of mobility. I think that's extremely important. So we're tuning in with our body. It's like we tune in with the fact that we're here, we're grateful to be here, we've calmed our mind and regained control back over who's driving the ship here. And then the third one is taking a little bit of a physical inventory. The way we work on this with clients and what we recommend is simply starting by stretching our neck, working our way down to our mid-back, our low back, feet and ankles, taking a little inventory of how your body's moving. So that way you don't realize that your neck hurts the first time when you go to look over your shoulder and back out of your driveway. So just by doing these little things can help keep our body in alignment, keep it from having the issues get worse and worse because you're aware of them. If my neck bugs me a little bit when I look here, great. Let me keep doing this a couple times till it loosens up instead of in the super sharp pain. So I feel that by doing this and getting in that good mindset, you're going to have a much greater chance of continuing the first 2 things that we did, sticking with them, and seeing a huge change. So I hope that you've enjoyed these 3 habits that we went over today. If you want to tune in next week for the Fix at 6, Dr. Robeck is going to be going over how you can help mitigate some of the negative effects of alcohol. So if that sounds good to you, tune in. As always, if you have any questions, please email them to info@fixmedicalgroup.com. We'll see you next time.